Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Salmons, Methods Guru for Sage Method Space. Today, we're going to talk about collaboration as skill sets and kind of attitudes and knowledge that will help you to prepare for career success. And I'm joined today by Narelle Lemon. But before she introduces herself, I want to just explain a little bit about Sage Method Space in case you are new to this site. We focus on everything to do with designing and conducting research and then writing about it and sharing results both in conventional and new ways. And you can see at the heart of this Venn diagram is teaching and learning, because we're very committed to student researchers, novice researchers, and even experienced researchers who want to learn something new. So we hope that you'll find something in this webinar that will be helpful to you. So Narelle, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, I'm Narelle. I'm located in Melbourne, Australia. I'm currently working at Swinburne University of Technology. I'm an associate professor in education there. And I have a background in arts education, both music and visual arts. And I also have a background in positive psychology as well. So I work with undergraduate and postgraduate students in teacher education, so those training to become teachers. And I also research across, I suppose I have a portfolio approach to my research. I do a lot of research in terms of the scholarship of learning and teaching of social media, and particularly social media integrated into our learning and teaching. But I also work with cultural organisations and have that arts education aspect coming through that way. And then I have a bit of a research portfolio developing in regards to well-being and self-care and mindfulness as well.
So I hope that you can see why I'm excited to have Narelle join me on this. And we should also disclose that we have been collaborating on a book, and you'll hear a little bit more about that as we go. So you might at this time find yourself at a career crossroads that you may or may not have been expecting. If you're a student graduating at this time, you knew you were going to get out and be looking for a position or the next stage in your life. But for others who are watching, you may not have been expecting that your life was going to be turned upside down as it has been with the pandemic. So we hope that what we will share here today will be helpful in whatever situation you may find yourself in. Anything you'd like to add?
I think knowing that you're not the only person going through this is a big one, and remembering you're not the only one who feels confronted and scared and unsure is a big one, to know that you're not the only one, but also that you are doing your best, and that's important to remember at this time.
So the perspective we'd like to share today is that, as you were considering where you're going to go next, the area of collaboration is something that's just, really essential in pretty much any kind of field, because, more and more today, we've got to be able to work with people across all kinds of differences and also all kinds of boundaries, whether they're geographic boundaries like we have, because I'm in Colorado and Narelle is in Australia, but also across disciplinary boundaries and cultural boundaries. So, thinking about how we can work together, is really going to be helpful, whatever you may plan to do. But as we know, anybody who's tried to do any kind of collaborative project, it can be fun and exciting, or it can be really challenging. And, there are all kinds of issues that can come up that will sabotage the best laid plans. There are all kinds of factors that kind of increase the complexity of a collaborative project. But what we are trying to suggest here is that, while you may not be able to resolve or anticipate all of them, if you can think about them a little bit in advance and look at the skills that are needed to work with them successfully, you'll be in a better place to move forward in a new position or even a new freelance or consulting project. But the more of these kinds of factors that might be in play, the more boundaries you're trying to cross, the more complicated it is, the more you really need a systematic approach. So, collaboration can be a very kind of natural and organic process. It grows out of, a shared commitment to a cause or a project or a goal, or relationships that you have with people you like and you want to do something with. But, can also be, kind of forced on you, shall we say, or you're assigned to something that, you didn't necessarily choose, with people you don't know and don't already have, a trusting relationship with. So, in those situations, having a systematic approach and some, ways to kind of move things forward will be helpful. And, as we go, we want to share a little bit about our experience collaborating. And, one of the things that we're well aware of is that, with just the two of us, even though we were crossing a number of boundaries, we could work together in a very natural way. I mean, if something comes up and you say, well, I can't meet on Tuesday, could we do it next week? Or, I haven't quite finished this, would you look at this and give me some feedback? We could go back and forth easily, but we realized that, especially as we were reflecting on all of the topics around collaboration, that if we had even one more person on this project, we could not have worked in that way. We would have had to have deadlines and checkpoints and, some established agreements about how we were going to work. Anything you'd like to add?
Oh, I totally agree. And I think the one thing we learn about collaboration is the bigger it becomes, the more complex it becomes, and the more we have to be aware of how we work individually, but how our team members and partners work as well.
So one of the things that really came out of our working together and our, we both done writing and thinking about collaboration before we joined forces on a project, but we found that one of the things that we both really, had in common was a feeling that, yes, there are all kinds of obstacles that can come in the way, but we're going to take a positive approach. And so, Narelle, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and this was one of the most exciting things about working together and discovering this, wasn't it, Janet, that we both are fully aware that there's so many complexities and with collaboration, but so much is framed around the negative and the problems and the issues that almost that becomes the dominant rhetoric about collaboration. And so we wanted to shift this. And so our work really looked at a strengths-based approach to collaboration, of course, informed by positive psychology, but really looking at strengths for yourself, but also with your partners. And how they help you reframe and reposition collaboration, and that it's a learning experience, whether you're selecting your collaboration or you've been invited to come on with a team, or it's a forced collaboration, which we often have from a number of different perspectives in higher education. So what strengths-based approach brings is that strengths is about what you're good at, what makes you really excited, what brings you amazing energy. They're the things that you love doing that inspire you. It's kind of, I almost talk about they're the things that get you out of bed. You're really excited, you're motivated, there's a glow, there's an energy, there's a smile that comes with it. And they're things that, you've got the energy with, but you also perform well at them. And when you approach a task, an activity, a conversation through a strengths-based approach, you're coming at it with a curiosity, and in a way that is a bit more gentle for yourself and for others, and how that can develop yourself, but also your partners and the project itself.
So one of the kind of systematic approaches we discussed in the book comes from this taxonomy of collaboration, which is was part of my work and came out of my research. And it offers a conceptual framework for thinking through, kind of teasing out the different elements and the different kinds of decisions that you need to make as a part of a collaborative process, and also has this visual language that you can use to kind of outline and map your projects. And, you know, it is not a linear model. So, you know, we talk about these elements and we don't have time to go into, you know, full explanation of, you know, all the ways that it can be used. But keep in mind that, you know, these different stages and these different processes, you know, are used throughout and integrated throughout pretty much any kind of collaboration. So the first kind of set of elements in this taxonomy are kind of the people side of it. So the individual part of it that is involved with reflection, the communication part of it that is described here as dialogue, and then the review part of it, which happens when, you know, we're sharing our work with someone else. You know, we need to be able to both give and receive constructive feedback. So, you know, let's look at each of these in a little bit more detail. Then the other part of the taxonomy relates to the ways that we might organize the work and the ways that we might design a project so that we can get done whatever it is we're trying to achieve. So the reflection piece is the individual. We're still individuals, no matter how affiliated and team-oriented and group, you know, collective mindset we may have with our team members, with our collaborative partners. You know, we still have to be able to make sense of it for ourselves, and to negotiate some of those you know, issues that might come up, and, you know, to think through how, you know, our individual work fits into this larger project. And this outline of the strengths, why don't you explain how someone might use this?
Yeah, this is perfect at that reflection stage where we're thinking about the I and then moving to the we, and how we become an us in some ways within a collaboration. So this is a list of strengths that are informed by VIA, or values in action. And they've been developed by the researchers in positive psychology, Seligman and Peterson. And they're one example of strengths. There are others that you can refer to as well, like the Strengths Profiler or the Clifton. But I like this VIA because it's nice and accessible. And so when we're thinking about the I, it's identifying what strengths we have. And you could do this through a formal assessment, or you could do it through strength spotting in yourself. If you were having a look at this list, what are the things that excite you, that you know you perform well, and that bring you an energy in terms of how you approach doing your work? So I know for me, I have creativity, curiosity and awareness as my 3 top strengths. And I know when I approach anything I really do, those aspects are there. And when I have those aspects, I know I perform them really well, but I really enjoy it, and I enjoy sharing them with others, and seeing, it's almost like a lens of how I approach my work. And Janet also has creativity as well. So it was really interesting being able to strength spot in her as well, because we both approach creativity in different ways as well as similar ways. And so that was when we were starting to move from the I to the we, and being able to notice. So as an individual, reflecting about your own strengths, but then also noticing, what do your partners do How can you frame what they do through a strength space that may be different to yours, may complement you, will help you look at things in a different way. But if we talk about the strengths and amongst each other and becoming that we, it becomes a common language that we can understand, how we can work together, reframe things, celebrate things, problem solve aspects as well.
And I think, it's, the love of learning that's in the middle of this diagram. There's also an aspect of, say it could be that, maybe my strength is something that one of my collaborative partners needs to develop. That's one of their, goals. Well, maybe I need to like step back. Yeah, maybe I'm really good at something, but that doesn't mean that, maybe putting that in full force might be overwhelming, to someone else, so I think, having some self-awareness about, what those things are, that, it might be that, you are so passionate about something that, that becomes kind of an obstacle to others because it's, you're taking over and not listening. So, I think that this, really starting from this point of reflecting on your strengths, it's just helpful in a whole bunch of different ways.
Oh, definitely. And I love that point that sometimes we have to be careful not to overuse it with those who we're working with as well. So I know some people I collaborate with, if I was really dialing up my creativity, I just would freak them out totally. Generating different ideas, being able to think on the spot, for some people is really confronting.
Right.
And so I would be aware to dial down that strength. And just as if someone else is developing a strength, appreciating and helping them do that, and having that awareness around it as well, which really highlights how strengths are movable as well. So we might identify strengths today, but in 12 months' time they may shift as well, because they're kind of like a muscle. We can work them, we can develop them as well. So they're always shiftable, they're movable, they're tangible, and can be influenced definitely by collaborations, especially long-term collaborations, when you are learning from each other and developing strengths that way.
So I think, underlying some of the things we've just been talking about in terms of strengths is, the ability to discuss frankly, these kinds of issues. And, that's maybe not a characteristic of all collaborative projects, depends on the nature of the work at hand and, the setting that you're in. But in any collaborative situation, we've got to be able to communicate. We just can't get anything done if we don't communicate. And that may be just, kind of a simplistic thing to say, but it's complicated in today's world because, we're probably using technology for some or all of our communication. So, deciding, when do we need to meet synchronously, either face-to-face or in a platform like this, to really hash things out, versus sending things through email or posting them into a shared folder. What do we all have access to the same kinds of technologies? So, there are a lot of aspects of communication that are very, nuts and bolts to a successful project, and, kind of being able to adjust to the preferences or limitations that the other partners might have.
Yeah, definitely. And it's about having a conversation about it. Sometimes we assume that everybody uses the same communication tools or interprets them the same way or values them the same way. So that openness to have that communication and kind of work it out for each collaboration, because there's also, we can make that assumption that every collaboration uses the same
Right.
Tools or communication strategies and methods, which often is not the case at all.
And I think this model, the circle of niceness, really plays into, the kind of intersection of reflection and communication, the kind of looking in and then reaching out. So, tell us more about this.
Yeah, well, circle of niceness is a term I've been using for a little while, and it was really inspired by my colleagues Rachel Pitt and Inga Newburn, who came up with the phrase. And over a couple of years, we've sort of developed and extended it, and to have a look at those notions of best practice in higher education, where we are, well, nice to each other rather than competitive, where we have that, we're kind of interrupting that behavior, rhetoric, excuses, the dominance of that it's okay to take someone down, or we're competing against each other in a way that's quite negative. I don't think I need to say more about that, because I think we've all experienced it, witnessed it, seen it. And so circle of niceness is an interruption to this, and it's about appreciating those that you work with in a way where you kind of are in awe of them, you're kind to them, you see opportunities for enjoyment, there's a development of a trust, there's a mutual respect there. And this is like an embodiment of being. And so the circle of niceness concept is developed from a mind map where it's been all linked out to the version that we've got here, that's in a circular. It is a circle, and these aspects that are core to how we are in academia, how we approach collaboration, how we approach being, and that idea that we embody these aspects, but we also encourage them in others. So we're modeling it, and we're scaffolding it. And I find we're kind of like passing on this behavior as well, and this way of being, especially with those that we mentor who are entering the profession, or PhD students that we're working with in that way.
Well, and one of the things that I like about this is that, I mean, certainly in not every collaborative project, we're going to develop genuine relationships. In not every collaboration, we may even, totally trust the other person in the other partners in a deeply personal way. But there's some element of this that we can still bring to it that is generous and respectful. And, to me, that goes a long way to smoothing over some of the kinds of obstacle factors that we listed before. So, I hope that you'll take a closer look at this, and I, will be in the blog post so that you can see the, all of the elements of it, and think about, in your own reflection, what are the parts of this that you feel comfortable with, and where might you, really need to be more self-aware when you're working with people to, maybe, step back from like jumping in with a negative comment, or, kind of, as Narelle put it, to kind of disrupt some of those behaviors that can be damaging, not only within a collaboration, but, even, within the larger context. So then, another part of this process, as I mentioned, is the review stage. And I think, this can be, really a difficult part of collaboration, because, if I'm going to show you what I've done, I have to be vulnerable to you. And the same goes for, looking at my collaborative partner's work. I mean, being able to give and receive constructive feedback, being able to create some kind of parameters around the review process so that everyone feels safe and comfortable, with it, especially as we get into complex collaborations with a larger group of people who we may not have, those genuine relationships. Then, we need to have some boundaries and some, clear expectations for what's going to happen in that review stage.
Yeah, definitely. And the principle of a circle of niceness coming in as well in how we approach giving feedback. review each other's work within a collaboration is important as well. So there's that real underpinning of a mutual respect, an acknowledgement that everyone has a different perspective, brings a different approach, different lens. And so, you know, we can be quite critical and forget that even though we can provide productive feedback and constructive feedback, we have to be careful in how we frame it, because that's our opinion, but it's not necessarily the only opinion. So, and thinking about it in different ways that is thoughtful, is still communicating your perspective, but realizing that it is one perspective as well. So that's where the strengths can also come into approach and thinking about it in a way of how you can listen deeply, or you can be curious about another aspect. You can bring in perspective, conversation, communication, those sorts of aspects coming through.
So then, you know, as I say, those are sort of the kind of people, individual and people skills part of the taxonomy. The other part of the taxonomy is about how we organize the work. And, you know, I'm not going to go into, you know, a lot of detail here, but, you know, I think, you know, one of the most typical ways that we might kind of divide up a large project will be to say, you know, you do this part, I'll do that part, you know, or perhaps if it's a larger group, we may divide into, you know, smaller work groups or teams who each have some part of this larger project. So, you know, as we're doing that, there are, you know, a number of things that we need to take into consideration to make sure that it's fair and that everyone knows what is expected of them in terms of, you know, whether it's, you know, kind of the almost obvious things in terms of format, style, you know, or whether it's the content or timing, you know, standards, you know, whatever it may be. So, you know, sometimes we might be working in parallel where, you know, we're all working on something at the same time. You know, other times it may be in stages where there are distinct discrete steps to a project, and someone is involved with, say, you know, someone might be involved with the research design part of a collaborative research project, where someone else might be the person or the team who's going to disseminate this research or do training about it or something like that. So, you know, we've got discrete stages that have, you know, their own responsibilities, and here, you know, a lot of the same kinds of caveats are there as with the parallel in terms of clear expectations, etc. But here, I think there's also the question of, you know, how do we keep everyone involved, you know, once the stages have moved on to the next level, you know, particularly, you know, in a larger or more long-term project. So, you know, it's a different way of thinking about the communication piece. And then, you know, where the rubber meets the road is, you know, what happens once we've completed these various pieces. You know, we've got a lot of fragments and puzzle pieces, but we've got to somehow put them together. And, you know, this can be, you know, this is a place where, you know, we really need to have our reflection so that we're keeping our own, you know, kind of biases and preferences in balance with the group, but also the dialogue, communication, and the review piece, because it may be that maybe something we spent a lot of time working on doesn't end up being in the final project because it just didn't end up fitting, or, you know, it's too long, or, you know, something. So, you know, how do we deal with that? But again, you know, taking the positive perspective, if we anticipate, we know that these are things that happen in a collaborative process, we can think about them, you know, proactively, and, you know, build enough time into the project so that when we get to this stage, you know, we can work through all of those, you know, requirements.
Yeah, and ideally when we're at that stage, we're making a decision together rather than one person making that decision. And I think I love that point, that if we're thinking about it as we work along, then we've got that awareness
Right.
rather than that shock at the end, which can often be one of those major issues with the collaboration, where someone then feels excluded, and there's misunderstandings that can occur from that aspect.
And so, a lot of times at that stage, is where we need the synergistic type of collaboration, where we're no longer dividing things up. Now we are sitting down together, and this is where we might need that synchronous communication. We might need meeting time, whether it's virtual or in person, to think through things together, and to look at how we can mesh the pieces to really create something that we couldn't have done individually, that really brings in all of those multiple strengths of the collaborative partners. So you might be wondering, so how did y'all do that? So Narelle created this great graphic to explain, how we made the effort to walk the talk, because, we kind of felt, really we should be trying to model the behaviors that we're talking about in the book that we're writing. So
Yeah, so this is like a beautiful example of putting the taxonomy of collaboration into practice. And so Janet and I have written a book, and when we were invited by one of the authors of the series who knew us both independently, but we didn't know that each other existed, and so that was a connection coming through, that we had to establish our collaboration from the very beginning. So we were at that reflection stage at the very start, very much I. So it was Narelle and with Janet, and we came with different backgrounds in so many different respects. But we came together and we had a chat. We met a few times and talked through the brief of what we were was being proposed to us. Could it work for I? Could it work for we? And so we started through multiple Skype conversations, didn't we, Janet, figuring out how could this look for both of us? How could we bring our strengths, our research backgrounds, and our career perspectives coming through to form a we. And so we went through that process of, can we do it? What would it look like? Through to developing a proposal and having it accepted by the publisher, for it to going out to review and having that feedback come through. And so then we moved into that beautiful planning stage where we set up regular meetings and a process of how to work together. We realized it was great to talk through what a structure for a chapter would look like that extends the initial plan that we had developed from the proposal. Then we would go away and write, and we approached writing the chapters in terms of dividing up different sections, and then based on our expertise, but then to come back, and that we always gave feedback and contributed to it. So it became, our writing also became moved from the I to the we, because the final version of the book, we can't actually tell which right. parts we wrote individually, because it's been very much that collaboration and being with the text itself. And of course, so throughout that process, we set little mini deadlines with each other. We used Google Docs so we could live write if we needed to when we met through Skype, or if we were working at different times, we could access it. And then we eventually moved into Dropbox, and once our editing was doing and we'd gone through that review process, putting it into format and working through that way. So we had that communication about the process, but also what technology was helping us do the work in a way that was helpful to us, because we acknowledge that 1,000 emails backwards and forwards and different file sharing that way is not conducive for writing a book at all, when there's so many drafts happening. And so that parallel collaboration and this sequential collaboration was really intermixed and interwoven throughout the process. Once we'd figured out our communication style, our tools, and how we were doing it, and I think we kind of tested it with a couple of chapters, and then it naturally just flowed through the whole book, which was just beautiful. And then before we knew it, it was like, wow, manuscript done, celebration time, which was great. And then to be able to share that out with the editors for the series, and then it going out to review. So we had that process of coming back and processing feedback from other people. And so again, we almost went through the same process again, didn't we? We nutted out what it was that everybody was telling us, then how did we want to respond? We and problem solved backwards and forwards. And then when we negotiated how we would change the text and what would happen that way. So it became very, very sequential in terms of that process. And very much the I to the we was an us process there throughout as we wrote the book.
One example I want to share that I think was really super cool was that the taxonomy was a model that I had developed. It's kind of been in evolution over a period of time, and so the elements that we shared with you today, were there already, in this model. But then once we started to work together, looking at the kinds of models and various, paradigms that Novella developed, and seeing how those actually, really fit together. So it was not a matter of, say, this and this, but, really looking at Novella's work and mindfulness and self-care, and how that fit with what I had been talking about in the reflection piece. So, I think this example shows that kind of dialogue and review is not only about, say, critique. It's also about, looking for, ways that the different perspectives can, kind of fuse and integrate and become something that is, has a new angle to it. So, that made it, especially fun as we started to get into that. And, of course, these are not things that you can necessarily plan for, and that won't happen with everyone, because I can tell you I've co-written things with a lot of other people where that was not the case. Not that it was negative, but that level of collaboration didn't happen. But, I think that having some sense of, what these different kind of angles and aspects are of collaboration, can help you to feel more confident when you are going to approach something new. So, we're certainly acknowledge that, particularly when you're starting out in a new career, whether you're fresh in beginning your career, from the start, or whether you're changing careers, if you go into something new, there are going to be a lot of things that are not in your control, and you might like to be, using some of the kinds of strategies we've suggested, and maybe that's just not going to be possible to do it, in that way. So, part of the, positive angle of it is to, accept that, there are some things that are just not going to be in your control. The standards you have, or the kinds of outcomes that you'd like to see, maybe are not a part of this project. And live and learn, take what you can from it and do the best that you can. And, if it's just, a difficult situation, look at that circle of niceness again and say, what part of this can I do in this situation that will have a, it's, good outcome, and it's positive feelings, by the collaborative partners as possible. And then, take care of yourself.
Yeah, it's about being authentic and taking care of yourself. And that awareness around every collaboration is different. And we've talked about those that are forced, or when you're told to because of the workplace, versus those right through to that stream where you've got a choice. But any time they may or may not work, and they're always different as well. So it's being authentic and coming with that mutual respect, and thinking about how you can learn from the situation. There's always something to learn, but yeah, that real awareness that there are sometimes things you cannot control, but what you can control is how you react to them. So underpinning that circle of niceness, and those values and aspects, or how you might work with your strengths, and spot strengths in others, is what you can control.
So we hope that you'll find something in our discussion here today that will be helpful as you move forward and think about the ways that you will work with others, whether you're in a formal workplace, in an academic setting, or out in the world and as a practitioner or a professional. Everywhere you're going to have the need to work with others. So we hope that you'll find these ideas useful as you prepare for your own next step on the path. And before we leave you, just want to share the Learning to Collaborate, Collaborating to Learn book goes into depth about using the taxonomy, particularly in teaching and learning. And this is just the in-press cover for our book. And why don't you just say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think this is due out in October, and very much talking what we've shared today in terms of the taxonomy, and a strengths-based approach to collaboration is what we unpack through the different stages of and different stages, but different experiences as a doctoral student, but early career researcher as well. And we've got some beautiful case studies that feature throughout, lots of practical activities, reflective activities that come through to really put into practice, and to help you put into practice what we've talked about today. So it's really exciting, because we can't wait to share this with everybody, and particularly that I love the title, Reframing and Rethinking Collaboration in Higher Education and Beyond. And that's really what we're trying to scaffold and support and encourage you all to do as well, and to have that rethink about collaboration, and that it is a learning experience, and it's quite cool when you reframe it that way.
So we hope you'll come and take a look at some of the other resources on Sage Method Space, because we have a lot of materials about collaboration, and hope that you'll find some that will be helpful to you.